Ooh, I look crazy today. That's okay. Nobody cares. Okay. Hi, welcome. My name is Krista Fredrickson, and I am going to be your virtual voice teacher. So for those of you who do not know me, I have a Bachelor of Music in Vocal Performance and a Master of Music in Choral Conducting. I have been teaching voice for 10 years. Oh my gosh, how did that go by so fast? I currently teach choir and AP music theory at Centennial High School in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I teach theater and musical theater at New Mexico State University. So the purpose of these videos are not to replace a qualified person or voice teacher, but to be used as a supplement to other learning so that you can understand the basics of vocal science. If we're in a pandemic and you can't work with a voice teacher right now, that's okay. Learn what you can here, but as soon as you're able to, I highly recommend getting a voice teacher. So if you're looking for a voice teacher, I suggest that you reach out to your local university or choral teachers in the area to guide you in finding a qualified voice teacher. So I want to talk a little bit about my resources that I use in gathering information, other than the fact that I just went to school for this. But some books that I used to help me find information that might be useful to you are Basics of Vocal Pedagogy by Clifton Ware. If you don't know who Clifton Ware is, he's a cutie pie. He's the sweetest man in the whole world and a voice genius. The other book that I used that I'm referencing a lot is called The Anatomy of Tone, and this is by James Jordan, Sean McCarther, and Kathy Kessler Price. I have actually taken a class with Sean McCarther and James Jordan before, and it was great. And then, of course, like a bunch of stuff that I just learned in school when I was a voice teacher. So this is a lot of my own personal notes from Westminster Choir College and some other workshops that I've done over the years to become a voice teacher. So anyway, let's get into it. So let's talk about air. Tell me how I'm supposed to breathe with no air. Can't live, can't breathe with no. Okay, I'll stop. So today we're going to talk about one of the most important parts of becoming a successful singer, and that is the breath, the air. If you aren't getting proper air, you will never truly have a proper sound. There are many factors that go into being an amazing breather, and we are going to go over all of that right now. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is your anatomy. Yes, your anatomy. Don't worry, I'm not a crazy scientist, and I'm not going to be expecting you to memorize all the complicated terms, but I do think it's important for you to see these terms and diagrams so you have a better understanding of what your body actually looks like on the inside. If I were teaching you clarinet lessons and I didn't actually show you an actual clarinet and tell you about the parts of it and show you what it looked like, that would be crazy. Why wouldn't we do that as a voice teacher too? So we're going to have a quick little science lesson. It's going to help you to understand your body, and then we'll get into the singing stuff. So let's talk about the lungs and the lower airway. So the lungs are made up of this spongy material that's very porous and super stretchy. The lungs are attached to the rib cage. So whatever's happening with the rib cage is going to affect the lungs, and whatever's happening to the lungs is going to affect the rib cage. So let's just take a look at this diagram here. So there's clearly a lot going on that is affected by the breath. And remember, without air, there is no sound. And as my teacher, Sean McCarther, said, without sound, there is no paycheck. So I always think about that. Anytime I'm nervous and singing for a gig, I'm like, oh, no paycheck, no breath, no paycheck. So anyway, as the lungs get bigger, air rushes in. And as the lungs get smaller, air is forced out. And air that is expelled from the lungs passes through the trachea, past the vocal folds, into the back of the throat, and out the mouth or the nose. So the trachea, or windpipe as you might know it, is made of cartilage rings. So basically God liked your breath so much that he put a ring on it. That was truly terrible. It wasn't funny at all. And I hate me too. I apologize for putting you through that. Okay, the bottom of the trachea splits into two branches and connects to the lungs. The larynx sits on top of the trachea, and even though we use it to sing beautifully, it is mainly designed to keep us from you guessed it, choking. You might not have guessed it, but basically that's its function. It's to keep you from choking. So basically, if you've ever had anything go down the wrong pipe, your larynx was probably taking a break and not doing its job correctly that day, which I find very rude. Okay, so now your lungs live in a house that we call the rib cage. The rib cage protects the lungs and the vital organs. It is made up of 12 pairs of ribs. The top 7 ribs are connected to the sternum. Ribs 8, 9, and 10 are also connected to the sternum, but like more indirectly. And the 11th and 12th ribs float like It victims in that horrifying Stephen King movie. You know the one. Okay, so this is really important because it's like a common misconception. Your rib cage is made of bones, and bones can't move on their own. And your lungs are made of that weird spongy stuff we talked about earlier, so they can't move on their own. They both rely on the muscles of the chest and the thorax to produce movement. These muscles are divided into 2 groups: the muscles of inhalation and the muscles of exhalation. So the most important muscle is the diaphragm. It is responsible for the majority of inhalation, and it gets the most attention. How many times have you heard from your choir teacher or another person say, breathe from your diaphragm? Well, the diaphragm is attached to the base of the sternum, the lower ribs, and the spine. And when the diaphragm contracts, it flattens. Because the top attaches to the bottom of the lungs, this pulls the lungs down and increases the volume, and it draws in air, kind of like a syringe draws in liquid. So the contraction also presses out slightly on the ribs and presses the abdominal organs down and out, causing the lower abdominal expansion that a lot of singers use in their breathing, and a lot of them think is their actual air, that their air is going down into their stomach. It's not. It's in their lungs, but those are your muscles and your organs being pushed out of the way by the diaphragm. So now there are other muscles that are being used besides the diaphragm that are important for singing as well, and they are as underrated as Robert Pattinson's acting chops. So hopefully the Batman movie will give Rob the vindication he deserves, and this video will give these muscles the attention they deserve. If you've ever taken voice lessons with me before, you already know I'm going to say it's the intercostal muscles. Yay! The intercostal muscles, specifically the external intercostal muscles. When they contract, they pull the rib cage up and out, expanding the lungs to the sides and causing inhalation. Singers most often feel this as a widening around the ribs, and if you've ever taken a voice lesson, it's possible that your teacher has asked you to put your hands on your ribs to feel for that expansion. Not to brag, but singers probably have the strongest intercostals on planet Earth. Did I make that up? Yeah, kind of. But it's an educated guess because I think we use them more than anyone else, and that's my humble and right opinion. Okay, so now that we've talked about inhalation, let's talk about exhalation. So the muscles of exhalation include the internal intercostal muscles. Remember, inhalation is external intercostal muscles, and the exhalation is the internal intercostal muscles. I know it's a lot of in, X, but you'll get it eventually. And it's also made up of abdominal muscles. So the internal intercostal muscles, say that 3 times fast, are working in opposition to the external intercostal muscles. They are also between the ribs, but when they contract, they pull the rib cage down and in, causing exhalation. So singers really rely on using them at the ends of very long or loud phrases. And you can feel that muscle work if you've ever tried to talk or sing all of your air out completely and it squeezes out. The muscles are very powerful and can easily warp your sound, making it too overblown or pushed or pressed. It's not an attractive look on a singer. Using your abdominal muscles, you know, the ab muscles we all lost during the 5 months so far of quarantine. When your abs contract, they flex the rib cage down towards the pelvis. This is about like when you do a sit-up. So think about that feeling of doing a sit-up. This action can collapse the rib cage and limit a singer's ability to take a really good breath. But if you don't believe me, try doing a sit-ups and breathing correctly for singing while you do them. It ain't as easy as it looks. During singing, the muscle is passive. Now, your obliques or the diagonal muscles around your abdomen connect the rib cage and the pelvis. They serve to stabilize the pelvis and the spine and also compress the lower abdomen. The transverse abdominis is the innermost muscle, and it wraps around the body like a corset. I swear to God, I'm almost done with the anatomy lesson. I know I'm losing you and your eyes are glazing over. But we have one more to talk about, and last but not least is the pelvic floor muscles. And these help you to stabilize the pelvis, and I've heard it described as like a hammock for the other ones. Okay, anatomy. We did it. We're done. I'm very proud of you. Okay, so now let's talk about the breathing process. When we breathe passively, just like when we're sitting around breathing without thinking about it like we do all day long, we begin with inhalation. So the diaphragm contracts a tiny little bit, the lungs expand a little bit, and the diaphragm pushes the abs out of the way a little bit, which is why the stomach gets bigger. Normally, your intercostals aren't doing a whole lot unless you're trying to work a little harder. Sometimes you'll see the upper chest work with passive breathing, and I'm going to yell at you about that later, so we'll move on to that at some point. But so, okay, we've successfully inhaled without thinking. Congrats. Now it's time to exhale. So when we're just chilling, the diaphragm relaxes. The lungs shrink back to their resting shape, and as they shrink, air is expelled. So the abdominal viscera and the rib cage also return to their at-rest positions. At ease, soldiers. And then comes a little baby pause for all of your muscles to relax after that hard work. Love it. So nice. Breathing for singing, however, takes a lot more control and is slightly more complex. So when we inhale as a singer, we start with inhalation. The diaphragm contracts more deeply, like way more deeply. Like when passive breathing, it's only moving like 1.5 centimeters, but in active singing, the breathing, we were talking like a good 3 inches of contraction. This time, the external intercostals definitely show up to the party. They contract to lift and expand the rib cage. It expands the rib in all directions, including the front, sides, and back, which is why if you've ever taken a lesson with me, I call it breathing with your Galinda bubble because it goes all the way around you. Okay, then we have suspension. So suspension is when we're not breathing or we're not breathing in or out. The larynx, remember that thing I said we'd talk about later? It's time for her to make a comeback. So I told you before that her job was to keep us from choking. Also, she pressurizes the thorax. Think about when you're lifting something heavy and you grunt. Ugh! Okay, that's totally a normal thing, but it's not really helpful to produce a beautiful and free tone, that pressurizing. So during the suspension phase in singing, the glottis, or the space between the vocal folds, should remain open and free, while the muscles of inhalation keep your rib cage from acting like a fool. At this point of suspension, you are neither inhaling or exhaling. It's literally suspension. When we sing, that's when exhalation occurs. The muscles contract, compressing the abs, which press up against the diaphragm, which presses upward onto the lungs, decreasing their volume and expelling air. We work hard as singers to keep those ribs expanded. That way, we have a brief but much needed recovery time at the end that leaves us open so that when we inhale again, we have the space for it. And then, we rest again. Although most composers do not give us any time to rest, and they're just like, okay, keep singing another 4-bar phrases, and you didn't have time to breathe. But that's a fight for another day. Okay, remember how I told you I would yell at you about breathing with your upper chest muscles? Well, the time has come. We have all seen those singers who take a breath only in their upper chest. Let me demonstrate. Don't do it. This is relying on the chest and the shoulders and the upper back. Okay, sure. If you breathe this way, it'll keep you alive. It's not going to do anything to help you sing well, though. Plus, you'll just look like that emoji who's confused all the time and nobody wants to look like her. Costal breathing relies on the rib cage expansion. Now, you know I love some good rib cage expansion, but it's simply not enough. You know how they teach you to breathe when you're exercising, where they say to tighten your abdominal muscles and keep them tight while you breathe? Well, This might have happened to you like when you're doing weights or in a yoga class or something, but while this can protect you from injury while working out, it does not allow the diaphragm to do its job properly, which means you cannot get a full, complete breath, and that is not good for singing. Plus, you won't be able to control the sound with tightened abdominal muscles, so it's a lose, lose, lose all the way around. Save that kind of breathing for the gym. Let's now talk about abdominal breathing. So maybe you've had a choir teacher show you this in the past. It's great stuff because it can be super helpful to singers who typically take really shallow clavicular breaths. And it also helps them to connect to their lower body. But it is still not enough. You can't neglect those costal muscles in the rib cage. We need both to avoid unnecessary laryngeal tension, which brings us to the best way to breathe. And this is a combined, balanced way to breathe. So this is diaphragmatic and costal breathing working together. We expand those intercostal muscles, keeping them open and engage in the low belly breath. This isn't a shallow breath, and it gives us the best and proper control over our sound. This method of breathing has been taught for like ever. Yes, ever. That's the technical dates and terms for it. And it is also referred to as appoggio. Appoggio is an Italian word, and it comes from the word meaning to lean upon. And it's one of the most important concepts in the Italian school of singing. And trust me, nobody sings like the Italians do. They know what they're doing. So the idea of appoggio can't just be about breath support. No. It has to include resonance as well as breath management. Appoggio comes from a combined balance of the muscles, head, neck, and torso with the resonators so they can work together in perfect balance. And we're going to be learning more about appoggio in our next video. In the meantime, I want to take some time and practice some of these techniques. So stand in front of the mirror, and I want you to begin to work a little bit on your posture, which we're going to talk about more with appoggio. But I want you to think about taking some clavicular breaths, so really shallow breaths into your shoulders, some really costal breaths, where you're keeping your abs tight and you're expanding those ribs and seeing how that feels. And then some really abdominal breaths, some really low abdominal belly breathing. And then I want you to try doing the combined diaphragmatic costal breath. So you can begin to feel your shoulders are down, you can feel that rib cage expansion, and it's going all around your pelvic floor is nice and relaxed, and you're going to start to see the difference. Watch some videos of people singing on YouTube and see if you can identify what kind of breathing they are doing. Once you know about proper breathing, it's really hard to miss when someone's breathing in a really shallow way, or if they're breathing just with their abdomen and they're not including their rib cage, their ribs are not expanded at all. And if you watch really good opera singers breathe, you're going to see that they're really expanded and they're engaging that appoggio all the time. Okay. Now that we've gone over the basics, you are ready to breathe. Congratulations, you now are allowed to breathe in this class. I wish that I could be with each and every one of you to watch you practice and figure it out and help you along the way. But if you make an effort to internalize and follow these principles, you will be well on your way to developing a great breathing process and posture. So I hope you found this information as interesting and fun as I do, and that you feel a little bit more confident about knowing the science of breath. In our next video, I will be talking about vocal resonance, and in future videos, I will be giving you vocal warm-ups and my tips for becoming the best singer that you can be. I hope that no matter what level you're at with your singing, you remember that it's just singing, it's not life and death, and it's supposed to be fun. Producing a quality, healthy tone is incredibly important, but having your heart in this art form is even more important. So feel free to sing in the shower, sing in the car, sing wherever you want to sing, and maybe just have a little bit more knowledge of how to do it slightly better. I look so forward to our future virtual voice lessons with you. And of course, if you have any questions or requests for videos, please drop them in the comments below, and I will try to make a video for it. Have a great day, everybody.